Alright guys, this is your homework video this week due on Wednesday, so let's get into it. When we first look at these pictures here, immediately I'm thinking sugar. I see a lot of sweet treats, and the reason I have these up is because we are going to be talking about what happens in your body when there's a disruption. So if the level of sugar in your body was disrupted, if you ate all of this, your blood glucose levels would increase. So your blood glucose levels would, go up. They would get higher. So when blood glucose is altered in our body systems, it involves a couple of different hormones to regulate it. Those include glucagon and insulin. So these two are going to be a big focus in this video. We're going to start by talking about insulin because that is what is involved when your blood glucose increases. So, insulin. We just said, we eat all this stuff, our glucose levels are going to rise. When that happens, we know our digestive system breaks down all that sweet candy and turns it into glucose that travels around in our circulatory system. So all of this glucose is now in our circulatory system. That's why we're saying our blood glucose has increased. We're talking about the amount of glucose that's in our blood. So eating food increases glucose levels in our blood, and increased blood glucose levels cause the pancreas, which is an organ, to release insulin. This happens because we have all this glucose, all in our bloodstream here, and it needs to get into our cells, right? We need the glucose in our cells in order to do cellular respiration, and it can't get in on its own. We have these individual glucoses. They can't get into the cells on their own. They need insulin. So when we have insulin, the reason we're showing it as a key is because it basically unlocks the cell and allows this glucose to enter the cells. So without insulin at all, glucose cannot enter the cells. With the insulin, that's a key that unlocks the cell and allows glucose to enter cells and leave the bloodstream, which decreases our blood glucose levels. So that is kind of like this loop. We eat sugar, it increases our blood glucose levels. That causes insulin to be released. When insulin is released, it allows glucose into cells and out of the bloodstream, and that returns our blood glucose to normal. So the whole goal of that whole process is here, returning blood glucose to normal. So when we eat sugar, that's disrupted our blood glucose levels. When we eat sugar, it increases our blood glucose, and this process with the insulin occurs to bring us back down to normal. That is called a negative feedback loop. So a negative feedback loop is occurring when our system has been disrupted in any way and we need to return to normal. In this case, we have way too much glucose in our blood, and our body is saying that's negative. We don't want that. So our body is taking actions to counteract that, just like it says here. Counteracting that, it's kind of self-correcting. So it shows it again here. Our blood glucose levels, okay, they get too high, the pancreas releases insulin, and that returns us back to normal here. So yeah, a negative feedback loop, it returns the body to its regular state when that state has been disrupted. So back to glucagon, like we were talking about before, this is the other hormone that's related in glucose regulation, and this occurs when glucose is too low. So when blood glucose is too low in our body, the pancreas secretes glucagon. Secretes, that is another word for release. So our pancreas releases glucagon, which releases glucose into the blood from the liver. So that brings our blood glucose back up. So this is a similar loop. We have low blood glucose, glucagon is released, that causes more glucose to be released into the blood, and now we're back to normal. See how it's that same end goal is getting back to normal. And I know here, just to note, glucagon and glucose, those are similar sounding words, so we just need to remember glucose is sugar and glucagon is a hormone. And this is all related to this big idea that we're talking about, homeostasis. Homeostasis means a state of balance among all body systems needed to survive. And in this video, we've been talking about glucose regulation, but there are a ton of different types of regulation. We need to regulate our body temperature, we need to regulate our pH levels, we need to regulate our blood pressure, we need to regulate everything in our body. And so homeostasis is talking about the whole idea of all of our body systems working together to maintain that balance. And glucose regulation is just one example of a way that we maintain homeostasis. So just briefly, the body systems involved in glucose regulation. We know the circulatory system that was involved. We were talking about glucose in the blood. And then also this one, the endocrine system. We had not yet talked about that. That system is all related to hormones. So when we're talking about insulin and glucagon, those are both hormones that are produced by the endocrine system in the pancreas. So that's another body system. And then those hormones travel around to where they need to go via the circulatory system, of course. Points, or a normal blood glucose level is 70 to 100 milligrams. Susan's blood glucose is 115. Henry's blood glucose is 60. And Laura's blood glucose is 80. So you've answered all the questions here. I know this was a lot in one video, so please make sure to write any questions down on your notes sheet and make sure you have your key points and key visuals noted on your notes sheet. If you have any questions, please remember to ask them in class, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Number 1, homeostasis is a state of balance in the body. That is a big idea here. We need to know this vocab word, homeostasis. Homeostasis is achieved by negative feedback loops, which is when the body self-corrects. When there's a disruption and the body has to correct itself and get back to that normal state. Number 3, one example of negative feedback / regulation / homeostasis is glucose regulation, when our body is maintaining a normal blood glucose level. And glucose regulation involves insulin and glucagon to maintain normal blood glucose. So just to check